When this podcast is released, I am in training, it's a very loose use of the word, to run 10k on May the 22nd, 2022, in order to raise money to help the people currently beleaguered in Ukraine. I'm trying to get medical assistance and help out there. So I have a GoFundMe page, Toby's Wheezing and Groaning for 10k for Ukraine. So if you enjoy this podcast, if you could send even the smallest amount over to that GoFundMe page, it would really help. Thank you very much. Throughout this broadcast, the director Michael Ferguson is referred to in the present tense because it was recorded before his death in 2021. I hope the praise herein stands as a tribute to an excellent director and very nice man. Welcome to this Omnibus edition of Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, get a friend to choose a Doctor Who story and their favourite things about it, and I have to guess what they are.
Hi there, my name is Pip Madeley, and I suppose I'm best known for being a Doctor Who nerd on Twitter, so if you're a fellow Doctor Who nerd on Twitter, then perhaps you might have heard of me. I'm taking time out today from babysitting my Vellans to watch one of my personal favourites. It's the classic 1966 William Hartnell story, The War Machines, which always takes me to a happy time and place. Now, Toby has asked me to come up with 5 of my favourite things, but will he manage to actually guess any of them? Well, stay tuned to find out.
Well, welcome everybody. I've completely torn up my plans and just watched a story that I decided I fancied watching. I wanted to do a bit of black and white. I wanted to do some Hartnell. The next Hartnell on my list, though, was Marco Polo, which is 7 episodes that don't exist, and a story I don't know very well, that I would have had to chew through 2.5 hours worth of telesnap reconstructions. So much as the special guest who has guided me on the journey to Cathay is somebody I was very much looking forward to hearing from, I'm a bit tired, and so I chose a slightly easier, a morsel that's slightly easier to digest, and also one that timing-wise is appropriate, as we will discover. So as special guest Pip, who's a genius on the internet and a very funny man, and I'm really pleased he's contributed to this, he has recorded his favourite things about this story. I'm going to see if I can guess what they are. So, I have the DVD in my machine, and I am going to ask you to press play all, or play episode 1, or whatever you're going to do, in 3, 2, 1. Now, I have a very interesting relationship with this story. I always get a bit cross when season polls and things happen online, and it's season 3, and everybody chooses the War Machines above things like the Massacre and the Mythmakers, which are better stories, and the Gunfighters, which I think are more interesting, takes on the show. But of course, at the time, this was a very interesting take on the show because there was nothing like it. We'd never been to contemporary Earth before. But because I think it's so like what is to come, I sort of think, oh, well, people are only voting for it because it's what they're used to from the Pertwee era or whatever. That's a brilliant opening shot. Director Michael Ferguson, who, having been a floor manager on things like the first Dalek story, becomes one of, I think, the most interesting classic series directors. Now, I think this is subconsciously why I've chosen this story. Dear Jackie Lane there, who played Dodo, has just, the news has just broken. Found out this week that she passed away, actually 2 or 3 weeks ago. Excuse me. And I'm rather sad about that. I've never been a great fan of Dodo. But I met Jackie Lane on a train. Would you believe? I was never going to meet her at a convention. I was never going to meet her doing a DVD because she didn't do them. She was the Greta Garbo of Doctor Who, bless her. And Scotland Yard whipped off into time and space. And I used to get that London train, London to Manchester, a lot. And I always used to go for whatever they're called, Coach E, because Coach E was the unreserved one, and I always wanted to get a table so I could plug in and do a bit of work on my laptop, whatever. And I saw this person getting on Coach E, and I was like, oh, and struggling with a big bag, and she was small and struggling with a big bag. I was like, now she's going to be in the door, and I'm going to wait behind her. Then everyone's going to fill up from the other end, and my journey's going to be. And I was thinking this as I was approaching, and she was still quite far away, and I thought, I think that's Jackie Lane. And I know I'm probably prone to hallucinating Doctor Who actors wherever I go, but good golly, I was right. So I like the use of the wind machine there. Isn't it great seeing? I love the fact that Dodo and the Doctor seem so close, and there's something fabulous about seeing Hartnell in contemporary London, because this is a novel sight. This is actually seeing Hartnell in contemporary London is as strange as seeing a police box on a quarry planet or whatever. So I know that I think any problems I have with this story are based on my love for season 3 and the fact that this always, as I say, seems to top the polls. And I do think it's perhaps not as necessarily as esoteric and interesting and just slightly odd as the John Wiles era. But also I think I need to get over myself a little bit with it. I'm fully aware of that. And isn't it interesting that Doctor Who can just walk into the post office tower? But that's a great thing as well, isn't it? Makes it a really interesting period piece that he's gone to the great new edifice in London. John Harvey there as Professor Brett. See, I think my main image of this story is of John Harvey, John Cater, and Alan Curtis as the three human, not villains, but the three humans who've been taken over, standing in a room telling each other the plot, but standing, because Michael Ferguson is a great director, his placement of their bodies, his placement of them is always quite interesting and good to look at. But to me, that is not as, that doesn't have the sly intellectual wit of Donald Cotton. It doesn't have the strange ambition of the Ark. What other stories was I mentioned? Oh, it doesn't have the sort of brilliant doom-laden thing that John Luca Rotti gives to the Massacre, which is a lovely, has great period stuff as well. I love the historicals anyway. But in its own right, this has many glorious things. Hartnell in his hat in contemporary London, and this has its own sort of strangenesses. Like, I always thought he was called Wotan, but they've decided to call him Votan. But yeah, this is the first time that the Doctor does what Doctor does all the time now, which is visit contemporary Earth. So what a different series it was for those first 3 years. And Hartnell, nearing the end of his reign, is by no means at the end of his tether, is he? And look how gloriously, massive this computer is. Whereas, of course, and that's the wonderful thing about the future as postulated in the past, is that they thought, well, to be impressive, you have to be big. Whereas, of course, what we've discovered about technology is actually the better something is, the smaller it is, the more technology it can fit into a compact space. So Jackie Lane on a train. I really need to do other Doctor Who actors in methods of transport that rhyme with them. John Abineri on a ferry. And she's treated very, very badly, I think. As we will discover, she disappears halfway through episode 2. I think that's pretty mean. Innes Lloyd, a fine producer, and it seems a very old school gentleman. I've seen him interviewed a couple of times, and Alan Bennett, whose producer he became, spoke very highly of him, of having, proper old world BBC manners. Well, he comes in and he fires Peter Purvis and Jackie Lane. Oh, good, slightly takey overacting there, Jackie. Good for you. And hello, Annika Wills. We will be talking about her a lot, I'm sure. Although, of course, this is her only complete story in existence. Good Lord, isn't that awful? So I waited till I texted a couple of mates and said, I'm on a train with Jackie Lane. I could have been on a plane as well. That's a good ceiling shot. Look at these funky young things. Yeah, the guy who has a fight with Ben is called Flash. Ewan Proctor is the actor, I think, and I think that's about the only thing he's got on his TV CV. But if you're going to have a part on your TV CV, Flash in Doctor Who is pretty cool. Flash in the Inferno, I like it. And here's Sandra Bryant as Kitty, who we couldn't find for ages and ages and ages, but she has turned up recently and done a couple of signings. She's very 60s, isn't she? I think she had a couple of records, Sandra Bryant. And she, like John Harvey as Professor Brett, was hired for the Macra Terror. But we'll talk about... I've got the Macra Terror on the list. We'll talk about Sandra Bryant's contribution or not to the Macra Terror when we get to the Macra Terror. I love Ben and Polly. So anyway, we will talk about them because we've got plenty of time with them in this story. We don't have, although this picture was in Doctor Who magazine where she's looking at him. There was a lovely shot of them. My friend said, well, you can't pass up this opportunity. But I thought, I don't want poor old Jackie Lane, who's always been reluctant to talk about Doctor Who, to... that's the photo in Doctor Who magazine. It's when they're facing each other. That's right. To feel like she's stuck on a 2-hour, 8-minute journey with a Doctor Who fan from whom she can't escape. So I waited till we left Stockport, which is the last stop before Manchester. So she knew she'd got a maximum of 15, 20 minutes. And I walked past a couple of times, and I was terrified. I was sweating. I get that sort of nervous smell you get when you're a bit terrified. So I walked up and down, and I kept looking around, and I plucked up the courage, and I stood up, and then I noticed that the person in the seat opposite me, I love Ben having Ben. I mean, I know it's a bit 60s, where the man has to do the masculine fighty thing and on behalf of the lady. I know it's a bit old-fashioned now, but it's a great way to introduce the character. You want to go home, yeah, go away, Flash. I know he's done a signing or two for Phantom. And of course, yes, they start not quite liking each other. I like Michael Craze is so natural. I think he's great. So anyway, I spoke to Jackie Lane, who that's it. I sort of got up, and I noticed the woman opposite me sort of flinch, as if she was going, what is this guy gonna... And I looked straight at her, and it was Tracy Barlow from Coronation Street, and I think she'd seen this sort of nervous guy, and I thought he's plucking up the courage to talk to me. And of course, I walked straight past her, talked to the old lady in the corner, and I said, are you Jackie Lane? And she said, how do you know that? And I said, and I explained who I was, and that I'd done a few things for Doctor Who, and I tried to reassure her that she could take part in the DVDs, even if she was a bit nervous, we'd make it easy for her. And she said, I haven't been in a television studio for 50 years. And I said, well, we could go to your home, or we could blind her. And I was really gentle, and she was happy to talk about Doctor Who, and she was lovely. And I just got the impression she was happy to talk one-on-one, but she was just a bit shy, and she didn't want to be on camera. And I know she had hearing problems, so she didn't want to do, commentaries with headphones. This is Rick Felgate playing the journalist, who was director Michael Ferguson's brother-in-law, because I think he and there's a connection because I think, was he the brother of Cynthia Felgate, who was the woman behind Play School, who I think was married to... I've listened to my Who's Round with Michael Ferguson. It explains. And Rick is in 3 of Michael's Doctor Who's, because he's Brent in The Seeds of Death, and he's Van Leyden in The Ambassadors of Death. And I think he's a very good actor, who's good in... and of course he's playing an American, so he's chewing gum, which is a lovely shorthand. And William Mervyn, the marvellous William Mervyn here, and the wonderful John Cater. I love John Cater, who, when I first saw this, I didn't know as an actor, and then, of course, I spotted him everywhere. I thought, I spotted this guy. Both him and Alan Curtis as Major Green were 2 guys who played quite prominent parts, so I thought, I don't know these guys. And it's because I'd never seen the cast list written down, so I'd probably not been looking for them, because then I, of course, discovered that they had huge careers and CVs, and were still, actually, when this came out on DVD, were still very much around. And this led to me, here's lovely Alan Curtis as Major Green. Another gentleman of the old school, blazer-wearing... cricket-loving, lovely Alan Curtis, who, like Jackie Lane, died recently. Alan died at the beginning of the year. He phoned me just before New Year's Eve and said, I think I've probably got till September. I'd love it if you could come and sort out my scrapbooks and stuff. And, of course, we couldn't, because we were all locked down with COVID, and he didn't have till September. He only lived another month and a half. But I had a right old chat to him before he went. I'd visited him at home. He had a stroke 20 years previously, but soldiered on, taught himself to write again with his other hand, still maintained his old-fashioned manners. And I think sometimes we have to be careful, because when we talk of old-fashioned, you go, was he very sort of reactionary and right-wing? No, he was, as he said, are you like me, a gentleman of the left? So although he was quite establishment, he was also obviously slightly iconic, a bit of an iconoclast within his own social circle. And he was very charming, but again, quite shy. I had to go to his house twice to interview him. And in fact, he'd have backed out the second time had he been able to find my phone number, because he didn't trust his voice. But we did it in the end. And he did have loads of scrapbooks. And he worked with David Whittaker when they were both actors, and he told me some really interesting stuff about David Whittaker. I'm not talking much about the War Machines, am I? I'm talking about my encounters with these people, but the people are my conduit to Doctor Who. This is a great story. I'm loving the nightclub. It all seems so incongruous for Doctor Who of this period. Jackie Lane's doing a great job suggesting that all is not quite right with Dodo. It's like she's got a slight headache and she's just slightly detached. I'm so sad that she's going to be gone next week. As I say, yeah, because Innes Lloyd, yes, he comes in and gets rid of Stephen and Dodo, but then replaces them with these bright young things. But then hairy-legged Highlander Fraser Hines comes in and he goes, well, actually, I don't need Ben and Polly much either. Get rid of them. Essentially in episode 2 of The Faceless Ones. I know they come back for episode 6, but that's only on film at the end. And, not even let's get you through to the rest of your story. And yes, and I think this is a story that, interestingly, because it's set in the modern day, John Harvey reminds me slightly of. Well, there's a bit he does. When we get to it, but he's not hiding the fact that he is under the control of Votan. But yes, so this story is actually quite important because, well, for me, because Cater and Curtis were still with us when they did the DVD, and I was emailing somebody from the DVD range, and they were talking to me about the commentaries, and I said, well, come on, the War Machines, you've got John Cater, you've got Alan Curtis, and you've only got Michael Ferguson and Annika Wills for the whole 4 episodes, and there's no making of either, because it was one of those budget range ones, so there's no proper documentary. And those guys, Cater's gone now, so it's Frank Jarvis, John Rolfe, and loads of cast members who were alive at the time. And well, the word well, yeah, they didn't ask some of the cast because they assumed they were dead, sort of thing. And you go, well, don't assume. They're in spotlight. It's not even like that to look very hard. So, but because I thought I was just sort of chatting to another Doctor Who fan rather than, of course, somebody close to the production of the DVDs, I was perhaps a bit more forceful than I might have been, and that was where the conversation started. Of, well, do you think you could be interested in doing one of the commentaries? And I went, absolutely. I mean, even if it's just telling you who's not dead. I like the way that's shot. It's very clever. There's something about the fact that it starts with Major Green dragging his feet and that the camera is slightly high. And I love the little turntable-y effect. The pottery wheel effect that comes back and is used a lot. That kind of thing in the war games. I understand. Yes. Oh, well done, Alan. I think that might be Alan's own tie. I don't know why I think that, but I think it is. If it's now, I don't know about ties, but if it's a cricket tie or an MCC tie, it's definitely his. But for some reason, I think that's his tie. I'm loving this nightclubby stuff. And when I did Evil of the Daleks, and Simon Guerrier talked about, the Doctor and Jamie in episode 1 of that being, it's the only episode with the second Doctor and Jamie spend the whole of it in 60s London, and this is our first episode. So this must have been like the X-Files, when it was actually on, sort of contemporary and conspiracy, and the Doctor consorting with people at the very top, but actually it's the very top that has been inveigled by the alien intelligence, or computer intelligence. Top work to the extras, who are after doing a lot of dancing in the background, which is never great fun. And aren't they all cool and young in 60s? And they're probably all either ancient or dead now. I love John Cater. He's a terrific actor, and he was married to Wendy Gifford, who's Miss Garrett, the beautiful Wendy Gifford, who was Miss Garrett in The Ice Warriors and was in The Power Game and so much else. But as I say, I didn't know Cater when I first saw this, and then I saw his name in a listings magazine we had at home. I don't know why we'd got an American listings magazine for being in Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter, which he's in, and then he just turned up in all sorts of telly playing. He's in The Woman in Black. He was in a thing called Shalom Shalom. And he was top billed in that, I think. It pops up in Black Eyes as well, I think. That set wasn't the sturdiest. But what I like about this is that Crimpton and Cater, who I think is probably the best actor in this. I love William Mervyn, and he's perfectly cast a type, and absolutely spot on. But I think just in terms of as a general purpose, all round and versatile character actor, I think Cater's the pick of the bunch, and so I like the fact that it's his character that gets a bit of resistance. I mean, he becomes a zombie like the other two and spends the rest of the time shouting the plot in a room, as the three of them do. But at least he gets to show that he's got some sort of pluck and some sort of mental resistance to the will of Votan. But yeah, and he's doing a good job of suggesting sort of. Oh, and I like this because they use this music in the moon. Is it music? This sound effect, be-doo, 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 in the moon base as well, and it's a really lovely 60s piece of thing. And on the moon, it suggests the moon to me in the moon base, and it suggests here, sort of burrowing into the human brain. I love the way he takes his glasses off, and I love the way he does this. Cater does a brilliant job at resisting, but not for long. And oh yes, he's not unlike Donald Pleasance, is he? I wonder if he lost out to Donald Pleasance for a lot of work, but he's a lovely actor and kept going. I've got a feeling his last role was in the first episode of Bone Kickers, which is probably not the best way to go, but there we go. But yes, a shame we missed. So if you Interesting, but because the DVD does have shortcomings. But I actually, as a student, I bought the VHS of this because it was for that they started to reconstruct, the various missing bits. So I'd only ever seen bits with the various edits intact, and so because even though I didn't have any money because I was a student, this was the VHS of this was one where extra work had been put in to make it as complete as possible, and it had got the film trims at the end, or the film sequences that they had left. So I spent, I don't know, was I a student? I may have left and been on the dole, so spent part of my gyro on it. But whatever it was, I went to Forbidden Planet and I bought it, and I wasn't in a position to be buying Doctor Who videos, especially when I had, my own sort of bootleg VHSs of most things. Yes, I'm going to explain the plot to you in a sci-fi way, especially as I have been taken over. That's more like my when we get to the arc, my impression of the Commander will sound fairly similar to that. So it looks like that Dodo, for her last story, is going to get a huge amount to do, because Jackie Lane sort of gets the cliffhanger, except of course it is overshadowed by the fact that it becomes an infamous moment in the history of Doctor Who, because Doctor Who is required. Bring him here. The choice to make Votan Visper is an odd one. It's not how you expect a computer voice to be. So I remember finding that quite surprising. I love what they do with all the graphics. So we have the Wotan symbol for the credits to go over. We have the novel way of doing the credits at the beginning, and that sort of tick tape. And I think every single episode introduction is different. And Wotan gets an "and" credit. Don't you just love that? I love "and" credits in movies anyway. It's it's a way of drawing attention to an actor who's perhaps not the star, so can't get star billing, but deserves just a slight little bit of extra note. But of course, Votan is not real. He's not a member of Equity, and our force there. And Votan. Now, I know I'm going to choose Votan's "and" credit as one of my favourite things. I'm quite tempted to choose the fact that it has that that contentious thing of saying Doctor Who is required, because it gives us something to debate. And there's, you can wriggle out of it. You can say, for whatever, Votan did not know what Doctor Who was called, the Doctor is called, so just substituted Who for as an indication that that was information yet to be understood. Although Votan does know what TARDIS stands for, but that allows us to have, as fans, lots of sort of interesting conjecture and invent theories, and that's part of the fun of being a fan. And it's quite a nice little thing. And I remember in Doctor Who: A Celebration, which I got for Christmas, my mum flicking through that and saying, to the whole family, is because this was an interesting. She said, "Oh, well, apparently he's never been called Doctor Who on screen, although he actually is in one episode." So you go, so. He's like, he's never. I think they use the example. Holmes never said "Elementary, my dear Watson." Kirk never said "Beam me up, Scotty," and Doctor Who has never been called Doctor Who, except he has been called Doctor Who. But that was admitted to be a mistake by the production team. Well, yeah, mistakes by the production team aren't real in universe. When Dodo leaves, Professor Brett doesn't go, "I think Votan has just made a mistake caused by the production team." In the in-universe of Doctor Who, he's called Doctor Who at the end of this episode, and as we shall discover loads of times next week. But what struck me watching that was seeing Hartnell in 60s London and the very 60s-ness of that, the Inferno nightclub, and how incongruous it was having Hartnell in that situation, and how fresh and modern that seems, and must have seemed to an audience that had just watched, the Massacre, the Celestial Toymaker, the Savages, all strange and interesting and very different stories. But historicals were more commonplace then than stories set in the present day. Because Doctor Who hadn't been able to get back to the present day initially, because that would have scuppered the nature of Ian and Barbara being unwilling fellow travellers. So I'm going to choose Anne Votan, but I might not make that my thing for the whole story, because I don't know if that's going to be the first thing Pip will choose. And of course I've got to try and think of what he will choose, and I'm probably the only person that will choose the way something's done in the credits. The Doctor Who is required, he might choose. But I'm going to go with my gut feeling, which was what struck me about that, which is William Hartnell's Doctor Who in his hat in 20th century London. And for the audience, here, now, today. Because 60s Doctor Who is weird, and that's why it works so well. Everywhere that the TARDIS goes is strange, and the soundtrack is very strange, and it's a strange show. And actually, when it comes back to Earth and our time for the first time, it's still strange, because actually it's strange seeing our hero thrust into that world, which I think is plays really interestingly as a dynamic. And there's all sorts of other great stuff there. I mean, I think Jackie Lane did well, and it's nice to see her. But I know that that's thrust into sharp focus by the news this week. And Michael Ferguson is an excellent director. Even Wotan's W. I love Wotan's W. No, I am going to choose, and I think it's partially because when we did Evil of the Daleks and Simon Guerrier chose Jamie and the Doctor being in the 60s, and I kicked myself for not even commenting on that in my commentary, I think. Anyway, what's Pip chosen for episode 1?
Right, thing number 1.
Ah, he's done the music. I love him for that. I love that. Thanks, Pip.
This first one, it's the fact that Wotan, or is it Votan? Votan? I'm saying Wotan. Wotan has got his own theme tune. You know the tune he plays when it takes over Professor Brett? It goes like da 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 da
Yeah, it's a good piece of music that does sound a bit like a sort of ticker tape. I love it.
There's no original incidental music for the story, so it was all taken from stock, and it's mostly just computer sound. So I always thought watching this that it was a joke, that Wotan was so self-aware and postmodern that it basically came up with its own incidental music when taking people over. And it even says Doctor Who, and he's even got a laugh at the end. So I think that's absolutely brilliant, and it even gets an on-screen credit. Anyway, that's it. Theme tune, brilliant.
I can see Pip isn't going to be entirely serious about. I'm going to agonise. He's going to choose something left field and funny, which is fine, because what this is all about is I know my guests only appear at the beginning and at the end, but they hopefully dictate the style and the atmosphere and the approach to how we look at their choice of story. It's been my choice this week because I've got loads of these to choose from, because people have been very kind. This wasn't even on my list of stories I was going to release in the next 10-15 releases, but I've brought it forward because the War Machines was required, because of Jackie Lane, and because I didn't want to do 7 episodes of Marco Polo. Sorry, Marco Polo, I love you, but I'm a 47-year-old man in the 21st century, and I need to take a run up, I think. So I don't get a point for that, even though Pip touched upon some of the things that I talked about, and I think probably ruled out choosing Wotan's credit because he referred to it but didn't choose it as a brilliant thing. Let's see, But I thought that was good fun, and it wasn't hard to choose something. I could have chosen John Cater as well. There's loads and loads of things about it. So, right, well, that's the end of episode 1. Let's see. I didn't notice Wotan's laugh, though, so I'm going to listen out for that next week. I hadn't picked up on that, but I do find a lot of Wotan's sort of noises quite difficult to discern. I mean, before he says Doctor Who is required, it sounds like he's got indigestion. And I remember thinking, is he talking? Oh no, he's talking now. But there we go. I'm referring to him like he's an individual, so it must be working somehow. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Come back for episode 2, which is the final episode for Jackie Lane. And if any of you get any mysterious phone calls between now and then, and you hear that regurgitated ticker tape music bang, don't answer it. Well, welcome everybody. Doctor Who is required, so I've got some for you. Episode 2 of The War Machines. And I'd like you to press play in 3, 2, 1, now. Oh, hang on. 3, 2, 1, now. Oh, fuck's sake. And I'd like you to press play in 3, 2, 1, now. Okie dokie, everybody. So the sound took a while to kick in then. So, when I was a wee lad, it's hard to think of this now, episode 2 of The War Machines was the only episode of The War Machines that existed. Now I've got to listen out for Wotan's laugh. Quiet. Bring him here. I don't know. Maybe it's just at the end of episode 1, because I know that they redo them. These have been redone, these titles, haven't they? But I like the fact that everyone's slightly different. Big episode 2 there, and this is the start of the 3 men standing and yelling at each other in a series of interesting ways, which is what director Michael Ferguson does to try to make the huge amounts of exposition they yell at each other interesting, and I rather like it. And I love John Cater. So this was the only episode that existed, and episode 2 of the Time Meddler also only existed from that, and then they both came back, but then it got quite episode 2 only existing was not a problem for me, in the sense that the idea that you'd ever get to see any of these episodes, the idea that they'd be out on video or repeated was it was a pipe dream. But then obviously I was able to start collecting, but by the time I started collecting, the return of the War Machines was a thing, and the Time Meddler too, but I didn't know at that time that there were bits missing. So then when it was released on video, they added the missing bits, and you can sort of spot them, or you could on the video, certainly, because there was a slight change in quality. Doctor Who. Yeah, see, it's not just to say Doctor Who once. All right, Professor Brett, we get the message. She's called Doctor Who. Doctor Who. And I think then at some point in this episode, somebody rings up and goes, stop saying that. He's not called Doctor. William Hartnell's, I'm not called Doctor Who, you know. Doesn't he look magnificent in that Astrakhan hat? That I think has he not worn that since Unearthly Child? I don't think he has. He looks terrific. And Ben and Polly look great as well. So modern, and to have this as the first story, in the modern age, and he recruits a couple of companions from it. I think is a great move for identification for the young audience. And here she is, oh dear, Jackie Lane in her final episode. I do think she's treated pretty shoddily. And I've been taken over by Votan, the evil war machine computer thing. Polly's costume, I remember, looked great in those publicity photographs of her. I should think Ben and Polly might end up being one of my favourite things, but I wonder what Pip Madel will choose. That's great. Exterior set. Raymond London's the designer, isn't he? Coming from cutting from the interior, it makes it feel all part of one whole. Yes, I'm lurking here with some chloroform. I like that. That's a bit sort of, it's a bit X-Filesy, isn't it? I understand it's a 60s version of the X-Files with that's Desmond Cullum Jones, isn't it? Who was one of the Dad's Army sort of uncredited extra platoon members. Now, I thought I had an inkling that this was Michael Rathbone's own taxi, but I had a little snoop, and I couldn't confirm that. Roy Godfrey, who as the Tramp I think is truly terrible in this, was he doesn't do much telly beyond this, I think, beyond 1968, but he was he did musical theatre. I think, was he a noted Fagin? I'm going to commit to Fagin, even though just because in this he looks a bit like Fagin with his silly beard and stuff. But there's something, so he had a good career in musical theatre, which perhaps explains why his performance, I don't think, quite fits on television. So take it easy, boss. But what's even better is when he's murdered his spotlight picture. It's not his spotlight picture, but a wonderful portrait of him appears in the paper, almost as if he's been going around specially posing for the moment of his death. You can see him playing Fagin, can't you? Yeah, he's giving stage tramp, isn't he? You can see why I didn't do an awful lot to tell you. Yeah, but yeah, Desmond Cullum Jones, which is nice for him to get a credit in this. Desmond Cullum Jones, who would do sort of uncredited Dad's Army stuff, because he was originally cast in the Web of Fear in the opening scene, which then got changed, and so his services were no longer required. But he was one of those honourable, stalwart sort of walk-on type actors on British telly for many, many years. And here we are on film. And I think one forgets, because as I say, I always think of the three men in the room. There's actually quite a lot of film here, and I'm a big lover of when Doctor Who, decides which bits to do on film just to make them look that bit better. And obviously the whole construction of the machine thing is a very important part of. It's a story full of boxes. I always think that about poor old Raymond London, the designer, because he designs this, which is basically a story with a warehouse full of boxes in which machines emerge. There they are, the Wotan boxes. I wonder whose job it was to stencil the Wotan sign on. There's Pat Gorman, the mighty Pat Gorman, one of the the great extra of Doctor Who. who pops up in more episodes than practically anybody else. Certainly nobody who's a regular. But I like the mixture between film and set, and the sets. The sets are great. But yeah, Raymond London then designs the Crotons, which also has monsters that are shaped like boxes. So I don't know if they thought, we need a lot of right angles, get Raymond. Or whether because this story is set in London. Well, no, because unless his middle name was Gond. Some nice high angles there, a nice high angle there from Michael Ferguson. I've got to have an eye on what Pip will choose, which I think will be something quite frivolous. But you must see his videos. They're a lot of fun on Twitter. Yes, it does, doesn't it? It feels fresh. The shooting of all of this stuff is giving a real sense of sort of industry and construction. Or they are doing their best. Frankly, all that's happened so far. Oh no. The baddies have tried to kidnap Doctor Who. That's a brilliant piece of bad science fiction acting from John Harvey there. Why on earth raise your voice slightly? And he must be destroyed. It reminds me of a bit in Blackadder's Christmas Carol, when Blackadder is in the future and Stephen Fry, as some alien thing, has the line, "Send him to the sprouting chamber." It looks great on film though, doesn't it? I like his hair and beard and stuff, but he's perhaps I was a bit mean. No, I don't think. Look, he's running. He's doing tramp running, which isn't very good at all. I won't say nothing, boss. Oh dear! And now he's spotted the thing that he's promised to not say anything about, which has effectively sealed his fate. But and that's pretty grim, isn't it? The suggestion is he's just been sort of beaten to death or something. Oh, and that's the first reveal of the war machine. There's the tramp's photograph. Dead man found in garden, but it's this guy. We've got portraits of all the tramps. Hartnell in his glasses. I like it when the Doctor wears glasses. Something that's come back into fashion. I've just been talking about Frontios for another podcast, and Davison in his glasses is always rather fun. I think I lost my train of thought with William Mervyn, who here is the main guest star as Sir Charles Summer, giving his usual line in Stuffy Gentleman, but his son Michael Pickwoad, because William Mervyn was William Mervyn Pickwoad, was production designer of Doctor Who during the Moffat era, much of the Moffat era, and his daughter did some art direction type work on it, or some contribution as well in the art department. So that's 3 generations of Pickwoods who have been credited on Doctor Who. So good for them. I really liked Michael Pickwoad. He was a real gentleman. He looked a bit like Doctor Who, and I was quite surprised by his sudden death. I'd seen him at a few conventions, and I thought he'd be around forever. Polly's been sent over by mistake, and Polly's looking brilliant in a hat that's made of pure 1960s. She's gorgeous, isn't she? And I love the sheer 60s-ness of her. It helps to make Doctor Who feel, cool and modern and funky, which it not always does. And I like Doctor Who when it's alien and strange as well. Oh yeah, Dodo. Yeah, you're being bad. And what was I going to say about this show? Yes, of course, because Doctor Who has been totally welcomed by the people in the Post Office Tower, and now Sir Charles. They've got that psychic paper? No. Hypnotism? No. Pretending to be something? No. Just say, hello, I'm Doctor Who. All right, Doctor Who, you can come and help us. Oh, Yeah, so we're nearing... I mean, she doesn't even get to the end of this episode, bless her. And Hartnell, I mean, is only... What, 3 stories? Well, he's only got 2 more stories after this. And I think he's slightly shaky on his lines occasionally, but he always covers that pretty nicely. But he looks magnificent, and he's still on pretty good form. Yes, it's the Doctor. Yes, not Doctor Who. John Cater's so good, isn't he? Yeah, and this piece, because of course that's what Pip alluded to. Of course, this has no original incidental music. He really goes for it. The older and Dodo makes such a hash of this. She goes, "I will assume that the takeover has been successful, so I will now give myself away." Yes, but the no, she's not Dodo. Oh, you're giving yourself away. You're sealing your own fate. It's like the bit in Keys of Marinus, isn't it? When Aidan says, "And how did you know?" I mean, no. But I mean, I can see why Dodo might guess that he'd been taken over, but she really doesn't press the point home until she gets discovered. But Hartnell's coping very well with this. Oh well, good lot of energy from somebody we sort of think of as being a bit doddery at this stage in his tenure. And doesn't he look magnificent standing in this? I like this set as well. Oh, you. Oh dear. It's not Dodo, Doctor. Oh, Polly's taking her hat off. Yeah, so Ben and Polly, I think, are probably going to be one of my choices. Is Doctor Who going to stop that Dodo? Oh dear! What? And it's quite a grim way to get rid of a companion, really, to sort of have her taken over and then not fully recover from the alien intervention. And Innes Lloyd did write her a nice letter, but as I say, and there was a story that he later approached her for voiceover work, and she said, "Oh, you sacked me years ago, so no, you can't." But it seems a bit odd that it's a nice story, but it seems a bit odd that Innes Lloyd, who was producing for Alan Bennett right up until his death, would go, "Should I do voiceovers on the side?" I mean, as somebody who does quite a lot of voiceovers, I know everybody in the world thinks that they can do them. Oh, tell me you do voiceovers, don't you? I quite fancy a go at that. Do you? Good luck. But I wonder if instead he'd phoned her wanting one of her clients at a decent rate or something, and she went, "I'm not doing you any favours." That seems more likely to me than a BBC producer would just go, I fancy moonlighting as a voiceover artist on the side. But anyway, she seems to have had some sort of revenge down the line. And I'm not normally, because I always think, well, what does revenge achieve for you apart from a sort of visceral kick? You know, I don't wish ill on anybody that's done me ill in the past, because actually what would something bad happening to them now, how would that help me? It wouldn't, apart from getting joy in their downfall. And I don't think that's a feeling one should encourage in oneself. But I will make an exception on this circumstance, because it's a pretty poor exit halfway through episode 2 of her final story, having been got rid of fairly quickly. And she's not the greatest actress in the world, I don't think, Jackie Lane, but I think she's sometimes not served by some of the lines that she's given, and the fact that she starts off as Mancunian. Yeah, the Doctor Who lore is filled with sort of, and she's doing BBC Cockney. She's doing Mancunian at the end of the massacre because she was employed because and she'd worked at the Manchester Library Theatre. She's got lots of history in Manchester. She's clearly doing a Mancunian accent at the end of the massacre. So I don't know what people are seeing when they go, and then people go, and then she's trying to do Manchester in the Ark, having done Cockney in the massacre. No, she's doing RP in the Ark, except for when she goes, when they go down that path there. You go, why have you said path when everything else is quite tortuous RP? So she obviously came on intending to be Mancunian, and they went, no, you've got to be RP instead. So she did that. So she had quite she struggled a bit the genesis of Dodo. She doesn't get an awful lot that's good to do in the Celestial Toymaker, but she's lovely in the Gunfighters, I think, and she gets some nice moments in the Ark, and yeah, I feel a bit for her. And I can sort of understand why she might have not fancied joining in, with Doctor Who stuff all that much. Although, as I say, she was very lovely and forthcoming on the train. So I think it was more to do with, and my understanding from other people who knew her, is more that she was just a bit shy and a little bit deaf as well, which could make people, which made her uncertain of, engaging and stuff like that with big events. Now, Alan knew how to use a microphone because he was an MC as well. Oh, this is pretty grim as well. They kill this guy. I think that's Desmond Cullum-Jones again. Kill the actor, not some extra. But it's a pretty mean thing to do. Yeah, sorry. Oh, it's pretty cold, isn't it? And that's a great shot. It's a great shot from the camera. It's not a great shot from the War Machine. It sort of misses, but I like the way that Major Curtis, who'd been such an affable sort of chap, is very cold because they've had their humanity. Oh, you just say, where is Doctor Who? Oh. And I like the fact that it's the person known as Dodo, but not the person known as Doctor Who, because then you could sort of get away with it, because we know him as Doctor Who. Ooh, yeah, sorry, you have to really concentrate. Quiet. Yeah, you have to really concentrate to understand what Wotan is saying. Yes, standing in an interesting place, please, Professor Quipton. So yes, Alan Curtis, who was Major Green I was talking about, was I think that was a good audition piece for Polly there. Alan Curtis. I'll talk about Alan Curtis later. Well, no, he was an MC. He was a pantomime actor, but he was also did the announcements at Lord's Cricket Ground. So and he and there's a good trivia question. Major Green, Murray from Delta and the Bannermen, and everybody played by Milton Johns have all done the sort of announcements at Test cricket for England cricket matches. So that's nice, isn't it? And Alan did it loads and loads and loads, and did it for years. And then Johnny took over. Johnny Dennis, who played Murray in Delta and the Bannermen, took over when Alan had his stroke. I really like Michael Craze. I like both, and they both make an immediate impact. Because I like Stephen, and I think Peter Purves is excellent and underrated, and a very, very good actor. This looks so modern, doesn't it? It looks like sort of newsreel of London life, and of course a lot of this is real, and you don't get that often with Doctor Who either. It's just sort of real life, as it were. And I think that makes it a wonderful backdrop. Just those brief shots of Ben, great. But because Stephen had been quite grumpy and quite severe, Ben is really likeable. He shoots little smiles at the Doctor, and he's obviously quite brave. And doesn't he have a line later? That bird saved my life. I just think he's. And he's a very handsome fella, and Oh, is the war machine going to break a table? I love this. Yes, these are the things we can do. We can shoot men and they die even when we miss them, and we can break tables. But they're giant things, aren't they? Tanks. And this episode has essentially been lots of basically building a machine and testing a machine. I'm not sure you could do a story these days where a whole episode is taken up from testing to see if the bad thing you've made actually works. But I think it's all been fine now. No, that was a slight change in quality there. So I think, I think this occasionally happens where you can sort of spot when it gets extra grainy is because it's come from different sources, and the bits where we've got extra material aren't quite as good prints as some of the others. So kudos to the restoration team and all who sail in her for there's a lot of whoever there's a if you're a fan of boxes, this is a tricky story to watch because the war machines don't have if the Earth was populated just by boxes, the war machines would definitely win. Jackie Lane, last credit, bless her, and Ben, the new companion, gets the cliffhanger. And Wotan. So Ben straight in, and the fact that the war machine has a light on the front means that there's a light on Ben, which just makes it a little bit scarier than just a normal point of view shot. I think the light, it's great. Nice, zippy, interesting. We'll press pause before the next episode. Okay, so what is my favourite thing about this? And because Pip is slightly irreverent, I just think it's got to be the fact that they keep calling him Doctor Who. I don't think the character is called Doctor Who. In one part of my brain. In the other part of my brain, I go, but it's called Doctor Who on the credits up until the end of Logopolis. And I still think that it should be credited as Doctor. He or she should be credited as Doctor Who, because I like that mystery. You go, is he called Doctor Who? No, he's not called Doctor Who. Then why do we call him Doctor Who? Oh, we call him Doctor Who, even though he's not called Doctor Who, because he was always called Doctor Who on the credits. And I just like the fact that this one episode where he's called Doctor Who loads means that we have to have a conversation about whether he's called Doctor Who or not. And we have to invent our own reasons as to why not. And also, it gives us a little clue that behind the scenes there are people and they have opinions, and sometimes their opinions are wrong. Even 3 years into the show, nobody had said to them, you don't call him Doctor Who. So I love that little anomaly and all the little ripples that it causes. My favourite thing about episode 2 of The War Machines, and isn't that good that if they hadn't actually found the other episodes, we'd still have the episode where he's called Doctor Who all the time. That was clearly why it was preserved in the archives. So, what is Pip's favourite thing about episode 2 of The War Machines gonna be?
Thing number 2.
I love the fact he's done that.
Now, I nearly went for the shot of the guy in the shadows outside the nightclub. He's dressed like a caretaker, and he sort of casually gestures to Dodo with a bit of rag and a bottle of chloroform. It's just really obvious. It's a good thing that, the Doctor's obviously got sight problems. He's got this monocle all the time and he's got his glasses, because the guy stood about 10 feet away and he's got a bottle of chloroform going, are you ready? Anyway, it's not that. My second choice, it's another Wotan in-joke, I'm afraid. It's the boxes. It's the Wotan branded boxes. I just love the fact that a supercomputer that's intent on enslaving humanity, and it's already got an eye on brand management. That's just amazing. I love it when the van turns up and they're unloading all these boxes with W on. I've actually got a T-shirt with it on, thanks to Clayton Hickman. I just love it. Stupid, but brilliant.
Yeah, I forget. Pip is not. Pip is going to be celebratory in a more irreverent way. I too have a T-shirt. Well, actually, it's a vest. It's a sort of gym vest with the W on as well. So perhaps I'm secretly working for the evil supercomputer Votan. Okay, I'm probably not going to get any of the things Pip chooses, but that's okay because I'm having fun on the way. I hope you're having fun with the War Machines, everybody. It's interesting. It's not a story I thought would be a sort of jolly commentary, because it's not a jolly story in particular. It's modern and thrusting and gripping and conspiracy and hypnotism and the bad guys are among us and computer futuristic events, the internet, and we're just being a bit silly. But that's okay. I hope you enjoyed episode 2 of The War Machines, and will join me for the next episode. My name is Toby Who. Or is it? Well, welcome back, everybody. It is time for episode 3 of The War Machines. The World Wide Web of The War Machines. The World Wide Web of Wotan. It's the most W story that could possibly be. So we're going to press play in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to an episode that did not exist when I was a youngster many, many moons ago. It's astonishing to think of how many episodes we're actually missing that we've had back since, and the fact that they continue to sort of drip back, and there's always that hope. But that's one of the things I love about Doctor Who as well, is the fact that it's not all been handed to us on a plate. We've had to sort of wait for it to come back and piece it together, and actually the archaeology, there are still some episodes that we don't know exactly what happened in, and we can guess from pictures and scripts and all that sort of thing, but we have to be honest and go that any single episode that comes back will be full of surprises, because this would have just had a vague description and stuff in the script. I suppose we'd have had this from episode 2, but well, actually, of course, this episode has this because we don't have all of the fight in the warehouse at the end, all of that film sequence. Some of that stuff was cut from the print that we have. We got bits of it back from Australia or New Zealand. No, it's Australia, I think, isn't it? But not all of the cuts matched. One of the cuts matched exactly. I remember them saying when they put it together, it matched to the frame, and it's the bit where the worker gets clubbed and sort of bundled up. Yes, and it's flashing black and white, this one. Yeah, just that Michael Ferguson, such a good director, go, well, I'm just going to make the titles interesting too. Let's do something with those, and even make each one slightly different. And it's very computery writing. That's a nice shot, that. And I sort of I like Major Green, because they could have had sort of any sort of character doing this, but it's very much with him and with Sir Charles and Professor Crimp, who's a sort of typical sort of fussy professor type. It's that the War Machines, that Votan has inveigled his way into the very sort of stereotypes of that we imagine of the establishment. A very sort of Popper Major, a fussy little scientist. They're the sort of figures we were used to seeing being in charge in dramas, and now that they've been sort of alienized, it's it is the sort of equivalent of what the X-Files was doing later. And I know the X-Files has a slightly more sort of grown up or whatever, or dark atmosphere or whatever, but that's what this would have seemed like. That's what this was doing. I do feel sorry. This is great though, because the humanity. That bird saved my life, isn't it? Polly even though Polly has been taken over, she does show a little bit of humanity ultimately. But actually, this is quite creepy because Polly's great and we've loved Polly and she's been funky new 60s girl, and now here she is being quite, cold and taken over by an alien, or by a computer. I'd forget. Right, yes. So Ben has been captured, and she looks great, doesn't she? Because she's got those big eyes in the shadows. Yeah, oh dear, and even those double doors are great because they give it a bit of drama, don't they? And because we don't have incidental music, the noise of the machine gives the drama. It's really interesting when the show doesn't have incidental music because its music is such a vital component. He's having a drink of something, isn't he? It must be. What time of day is it? Don't see people drinking that often in Doctor Who. He's now Mr. Rose. If you've never seen Mr. Rose with William Mervyn, it is available on DVD, and it is a delightful thing, and he's absolutely brilliant in it. And it's just a great sort of comedy drama that's jolly, and lots of Who actors to spot in it too. But he was a terrific actor, and he's one of those actors that looks ancient, but I think he was only in his 60s when he died. Now, Hugh Cecil at the back there is the bald extra. He was he did quite a lot of bald extra work. He's one of the technics in Dalek's Master Plan. But yeah, you needed somebody to look bald. You got Hugh Cecil. And Kevin Cecil, the comedy writer, is a relative of his. Because I remember they put them saying, we put our Uncle Hugh in something. And of course, in the machine there, it must have been a beggar to control that machine. I like the way it's sort of wobbling, because I suppose if it had been just not moving at all, you'd go, well, how do we know that it's moving? So it's just wobbling from side to side, just to remind you it's alive. Yeah, so is Polly's subconscious going, keep this guy alive so that we can let him escape? He's worked up a sweat, hasn't he, Ben? Yeah, so Brian Hodgson, the special sounds, is on overload this week, and is often, like with the Crotons, is another story where there's no incidental music, where it's the electronic sounds that keep the drama going. Bing! So there's a bit of stock music, but there's not much music, and they do like the crash zooms, don't they, into the post office tower. Here's the new thing. Let's make it. And here's how funky it is. There's a lot of lights going on as well. Now, I think that was a cut. I think that pull away from Votan was stolen from somewhere else, because I mean, this is why. This clip was used on a documentary called "Resistance is Useless," which thought the best way to celebrate Doctor Who would be to infer it was a bit naff in places. So this is the cut. This is another cut that has been reinstated. So that this was cut, and I think it is. There's something really creepy about the way that he's bundled up by the machine here. Look at that. I like that. That's great. It's like, yeah, he's so that was reinstated, that bit, and the bit where Crimpton was talking. It's interesting because that's a cut where it's just going, we will destroy all human life. And they go, no, the people of wherever it is can't stand for the idea that these machines might destroy human life. I mean, don't know what sort of program you think you're watching, but let's not have moments where they threaten death and destruction. That's where poor old Polly's knackered. They've ruffled her hair a bit. But it's a pretty harsh policy, isn't it? As soon as you can't work anymore, we'll knock you out and bundle you across. Oh, Polly, you've really fallen hook, line, and sinker for it. Good old Ben. These two make an immediate impact, and you've sort of forget. You can't imagine Dodo in the story anymore, which is a shame. I mean, I'm a big fan of, Quatermass and the Pit, which this starts to resemble very shortly when the soldiers come, and all of this stuff's very good. It's sort of dramatic stuff. I know it's just men in a warehouse doing things, but chucking the gun from one to the other, putting those bomb things in the boxes, and there's a real sort of momentum there, preparing for action. I mean, this is all. I mean, the first 3 episodes are all about the preparatory work, really, for the spearhead or the invasion or whatever. But that's nice. Anything that shows humanity seeping through into somebody that has been taken over, I think, is quintessential Doctor Who. Is that whatever happens, if a glimmer of what makes humanity special, because yes, we have our problems and there's lots about us that's bad and all that sort of thing, but the humanity that does poetry and Shakespeare and beauty and humor and all of those sorts of things that we love, that we like to think make us worth saving, when those things show through, that's always the triumph of humanity, whatever you like to call humanity. Our ability to make a well-prepared meal and enjoy a sunset. And Polly does also, of course, survive to make many a cup of coffee. So perhaps that's what Peter Davison should have said in Earthshock. The ability to have a nice cup of coffee. Because they're a great contrast for Hartnell, aren't they, Ben and Holly? Because, he's young and active and action, and she's sort of modern and cool and sophisticated, and then you've got the old eccentric guy. And I think I would have happily seen another season of Hartnell and Ben and Polly. I'd have happily seen another season of Troughton and Ben and Polly, and I love Jamie, but maybe if the Highlanders had come at the end of Troughton's first season, we could have had a little bit more of these guys, because once Fraser comes in and as Lloyd gets out his big red pen again and goes, well, get rid of you guys, just like we did the people that you replaced. Harsh. And Innes Lloyd, by all accounts, was an absolutely lovely fellow. Hartnell's in great form in this. And I like the sort of rapport that he fits in so well with this. It makes you sort of go, I wonder why they didn't have Doctor Who. I mean, Hartnell is being Pertwee here, essentially, although with slightly less contempt for the man from the Ministry. But he's in absolute command of this situation, and he fits in brilliantly. In this sort of backdrop. I love William Mervyn because he's got that sort of thing of being terribly affronted by the fact that we might be overtaken by aliens. If you consider it necessary, Doctor Who, even though I only met you 2 episodes ago, and we've not really been properly introduced. And then the army come in, and it's the first time we see the British Army in Doctor Who. And I know UNIT are the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, but they're essentially the British Army. And of course, My first Doctor Who target novelisation was The Web of Fear, so I consider that very much to be the ground zero of Doctor Who, even though I'd seen Doctor Who on the telly. So the Doctor supported by soldiers, and it's a very clever way of the series having its cake and eating it, because the Doctor doesn't do guns and violence and that sort of thing, but I'll happy hang around with people who do, just in case he needs something blowing up. And that's the wonderful liberal hypocrisy at the heart of my worldview of Doctor Who. I know a lot of people see people who are perhaps from the right of politics, which I'm not, would go, well, no, what Doctor Who does is he sees a bad thing and he destroys it, which is what we should do with bad things, and you should be, and that is a perfectly legitimate for a character who's blown up his fair share of aliens. That is a perfectly legitimate view, and I'm aware that mine is slightly more hypocritical, where I go, no, he doesn't take life and he doesn't hold weapons. You go, yeah, but he does let other people do that. I mean, even recently at the end of the Timeless Children one, where the Doctor goes, I can't do this, and then Ian McElhenney from Game of Thrones goes, I can do it because I'm old and don't mind dying, and she goes, well, all right, you can do it then. You go, well, I haven't quite let you off the hook morally, has it? Excellent telephone acting there from William Mervyn. Yeah, very good telephone acting, William Mervyn, to give everybody else a chance. Are we still in the studio? Yeah. No, we're on film, and this is great. Look at this. You don't expect to see this sort of stuff with the Hartnell Doctor at all. I still think it looks quite novel because I'm so used to his other sorts of adventures that are either in space or in the past, generally. And I think this is thrilling. I think to have been a kid watching this, used to, well, I know alien planets are thrilling, but there's something so immediate about this. And Frank Jarvis there, he was a good actor, who wasn't terribly lucky with Doctor Who after this, playing as he does Scart in Power of Kroll and Buckethead number 2 in Underworld. John Rolfe as the captain, who's a bit luckier because he's in the Green Death and the Moonbase prior to that. He worked. I felt he only died last year, John Rolfe. He did a shape. My brother had one foray into the world of acting as one of the princes in the tower at Ludlow Festival, and John Rolfe was in it. And my brother Paddy said he was absolutely lovely. But when I sent John Rolfe some stuff to sign when he declined to do the Moonbase commentary for us, and people decline for various reasons. They want to travel, they're ill, don't remember anything. But he wrote a thing back saying, no, thanks, but no thanks. So I sent him some stuff to get signed because we do some sort of charity things, picture frames and stuff, to then get as many signatures as we can. He sent them, and I sent them recorded delivery. He sent them back, but didn't sign them. No cover note. And you go, oh, it's because no, I know because some elderly people go, oh well, it's because they will be sold on eBay. Yeah, there's any reasons why I think people feel that they could potentially be exploited. So, but and I'd said in the thing, oh, my brother was in Richard III with you and blah blah blah, but no, nothing. I thought that yeah. Anyway, shame. But he's a good actor. And he's good as the captain in this. Now, we're missing some of this battle. I know that the restoration team pieced this together as best they could, and they listened to the soundtrack and go, okay, we've got those bits, but there's still some bits that were deemed too violent for everywhere. So we've probably got a couple of really good deaths or something, or scary moments of peril that we've lost out on. But this is brilliant. I love all of this stuff. And poor old Alan Curtis is in the studio in close-up doing all the dialogue, really. There's quite a lot of onus, actually, on him and John Cater and John Harvey, where they're having to do most of the speaking about what's going on. But it's not terribly rewarding stuff to do. And it, it's not dialogue that really sort of means anything. It's just sort of, the enemies are in the building, they must be destroyed. Just to have something to sort of cut back to. But it's quite peculiar, and I think they're rather heroic. So yeah, there's some scrapping. Now I think that worker fighting there is the same worker that gets knocked out earlier, so I think he must be a stuntman. So yeah, we don't know exactly what we're missing here, and I know there's a few reversals and a few cutaways, and of course it's not quite clear because and there's an actor called Robin Dawson who's credited as Soldier, but there's not a soldier who has a line, so I don't know if he gets a particular death or something, but we don't know who he is. We don't even know which one he is really, because there are lots of soldiers, but there doesn't seem to be one that gets a special thing to do that isn't the Sergeant John Boyd Brent, the Captain John Rolfe, or the Corporal Frank Jarvis. Yeah, go on, Alan. You keep giving us bits of dialogue. I suppose that could be Robin Dawson, could it? Because he gets bits to do, but that's stunt work, isn't it? But yeah, this is very modern for Doctor Who of this time. Yeah, run away! Oh, somebody's going to get killed here. Yeah. Oh, dear. Yeah, because the guns aren't working. So I think it's, yeah, I wondered if it was, how clear it was whether the guns are working or not. But yeah, because you're expecting a big sort of sort of battle. There's a fantastic moustache on that soldier with the swagger cane at the back. I wonder if that was his own moustache. You can tell from the quality of this. This is some of the stuff that's been reinserted. But it's not massive. It's not hugely distinct, is it? And some of it's very unclear. But I mean, deliberately so, because the fight sequences with quick cuts and everything are that helps to sell them, because with a static wide camera or just a couple of cameras on it in the studio, it can look a bit naff, as some studio bound fights in Doctor Who have proved over the years. But I think Michael Ferguson is a good action director, so I think his use of close-ups and slightly indistinct shots also helps us cover it when there's indistinct. Look at that moustache. I wonder if he was somebody. We need somebody to play a scene. Oh, Wilf's get that guy Wilf. He's got his own moustache, because sometimes you say, like, I've got my own taxi cab, or I've got my own horse, I've got my own military moustache. I love this shot because I remember that was used on the video when they showed some of the film sequences, and this stuff looks gorgeous. Yeah, look at that. That is beautiful. That is absolutely gorgeous. Pristine film. Looks like it was done yesterday, doesn't it? And having those soldiers, look at that. That's cracking. I love all of this. This is really exciting and thrilling. And Pat Gorman, as if you couldn't ask for anything more. Pat Gorman has obviously changed sides, because he was one of the working baddies last week. Now there's the guy with the okay moustache at the back. But there's another guy with an even better moustache. I mean, you could certainly get a grip on those if the situation requires you to. Now this is interesting, because obviously I haven't got all of the film snippets, because this isn't quite so good quality as the other stuff. So it really has been sort of pieced together. But I have to say it is slightly. I know it's a plot thing that the guns don't work, but of course, and so it's a very clever way of having a cake and eating it. So we got lots of soldiers charging around, but we don't have to spend any money on blank ammunition and all of that sort of thing. But it does mean you miss a lot. If you're after Boy's Own Adventure, you do lose a bit of the exciting gunfire. But this is magnificent. Everybody runs off, and Doctor Who, look at him. What a hero. Unperturbed. He isn't going to back off. And it's great because it's a cliffhanger of, well, it's not just that the Doctor's in danger, because he obviously doesn't think he is, but it's a kind of, what the hell is going on? And the light, again, the use of that light, that's brilliant. I love that. Although it's quite unclear, isn't it? You go, what's happening? But that's what makes you tune in next week. So yeah, Worker Eddie Davis and Soldier Robin Dawson. Well, I don't think we're quite sure exactly which of those two guys are, because there's plenty of workers and there's plenty of soldiers, but and they're not guys that we've seen in anything else. That's as far as I can remember from in my trying to work out, everything we know about every single credited performer in Doctor Who. I know there's always been a little bit of mystery or uncertainty around those two, but you don't care about that. What you care about is, there's an actor called Edward David in the Quatermass Experiment playing Indian journalist, which makes you probably quite pleased that episode doesn't exist, because it would probably be fairly awkward. But Edward David, I've never seen in anything else either. And I remember when I think I first saw this and the credits were quite indistinct, I was like, is it Eddie David? Oh, hang on, have I found... No, Eddie Davis. So I don't think he's the same as Edward David. And it's interesting because you think of, oh, well, it could be because they're quite close to each other. Well, no, The War Machines is 13 years after the Quatermass Experiment, so plenty of time for somebody to stop acting or die or do whatever, but we think of the, if you don't think about it too hard, you think, oh well, they're probably not, they didn't follow on too long. Well, actually, yeah, The War Machines is the equivalent of early Tom Baker away from the first episode, which we consider quite a stretch. So although Quatermass was a little before, it was actually long enough before. God, it was already 13 years old. No wonder I was scuppered when I started looking to it, because I wasn't even born until how many years after this was I born? 8 years after this. So yeah, Quatermass Experiment was 21 years old when I was born. My goodness. Anyway, what is Pip Maidley's favourite? Well, what is my favourite thing? What is my favourite thing about the War Machines episode 3? Is it the cliffhanger? Is it the stuff? Well, Pip's going to choose something daft, isn't he? I do like the stuff with the soldiers. I do like Polly's glimmer of humanity. I think I'm going to go for that cliffhanger because Hartnell often, certainly in this period, has a rap for being not always on top of his game. I think he's absolutely majestic in this, and I think he looks great. And because the cliffhanger's got the light going on as well, but as well as that shot, I'm going to go for the cliffhanger for episode 3. What's Pip going for?
Okay, on to 3. Great thing number 3 is the cliffhanger to episode 3. I think it's fantastic. You've got the army doing a runner after that pretty interminable battle scene, which goes on and on and on. The War Machine's on the warpath. It's got a massive fire extinguisher, which seems to have the opposite effect of actually setting stuff on fire. Well, I don't understand how that works, but there you go. And you've got the Doctor stood in its way. He steps towards the machine. He's got his thumbs on his lapels. He straightens his back. Totally defiant. Iconic William Hartnell moment. So that's number 3. Oh, and it's also worth mentioning that if you watch carefully, you can actually see William Mervyn, who plays Sir Charles Summer. You can see him accidentally bump his head on one of the arches. Watch it, and I promise you'll never not see it again.
Ah, I might go back and watch that. So, yeah, good. Now, so if you've just watched The War Machines, now go back and watch it all over again, but without me chuntering through it. Well, welcome everybody. It's time for the last episode of The War Machines. So I would like you to get ready with your own machines. And we're going to press play in 3, 2, 1, go. So here we go. This is the last episode of the last fully surviving Hartnell story. Which this wasn't when I was a bairn, so what was? Was it the Gunfighters? How extraordinary. So I'm glad this got, and again, it's different, isn't it? It's a different colour scheme. So, episode 4. So I don't think I've talked enough about the fact that this predicts the internet. That was the sort of thing that you'd always use to arm yourself against people who say, Doctor Who's rubbish. You go, actually, it predicted that we'd have a female prime minister, as if somehow, you know, getting something right that turned out to be true was somehow a sign of brilliance. But it is an extraordinary thing that the first one, set in the modern day, predicts, you know, a worldwide network of computers, which, you know, I mean, it's had slightly more impact on our life than causing the quite slow building of a cumbersome machine, or several. But it's it's a smart sci-fi idea, and tying in with the post office tower as well is nice too. And sort of communication superhighways that we now take for granted. Now this is quite Quatermassy, because Quatermass often told its stories via the media, and then Russell T Davies does it, doesn't he, with Aliens of London and things like that, and Trinity Wells and all of that. Whereas here we have Kenneth Kendall appearing as himself. He was a genuine newsreader. So this one is lovely. Always like it when real newsreaders appear as themselves, especially somebody as illustrious as Kenneth Kendall, who was very highly thought of. This is very reminiscent of the although there were speaking parts in Quatermass, the pub watching events unfolded, particularly in Quatermass and the Pit, which is a great way of sort of saying the nation is aware of this, and the idea that panic is spreading, and it's a great way of doing sort of exposition as well. Here we have a minister played by George Cross, named after the medal. But yeah, this is Doctor Who very much sort of with the movers and shakers in Whitehall. This is sort of yes, Prime Minister, the alien invasion. But yes, so I like the fact that they managed to get Kenneth Kendall in to play himself. This is Edward Colliver, who I think a friend of mine got in touch with relatively recently, but not seen him do anything else. Don't know anything about him. Is that a slightly broken thing he's got there? There's a bit of a hole in the top of his radio. But this is pretty grim, isn't it? Because don't the war machines start turning on everybody now? Yes, because obviously, Votan, the computer, has decided that it can do without mankind. Now, that music is used in one of the cyber stories. It's Tomb of the Cybermen. And it's a lovely paranoia about, machines wiping us out. Interesting, the paranoia now is, what does this information superhighway do with our information? And are we, prey to, an invasion of our privacy, a control of us? Now, that is listed in the discontinuity guide as a mistake that Ben Knox, it's a wonderful book, the discontinuity guide, one of the first sort of syntheses of loving the show, but sort of highlighting some of its shortcomings. And it would show, it listed goofs, but it says that bit there is Ben knocking the end off the gun and sticking it back on again. No, it's not. It's a plot point. Ben drops the Doctor's ring, goes to give it to him, but the Doctor's chatting away, so he gives up, and he uses the ring. The ring is important later on, so it's not actually a mistake. Yours was the mistake, discontinuity guide, because the end of the gun doesn't get knocked off. The idea of the internet superhighway. All Wotan needed to do was really go on Twitter and wind people up by trolling them with Wotan 1692755 or whatever. Now, is he going to get? I think he does get killed now. That's pretty grim, yeah. Because the war machines are now going to start destroying us. I'm going to sneeze. I've got hay fever. No, I'm not. I wish I'd picked up on Pip's idea of the branding. Doesn't hide his purpose. Yeah, so the brainwashing thing is odd, because Major Green spent the whole thing sort of killing off slaves and all of that sort of thing, and so what, has he been sort of totally under the control of Wotan? But then he needed sort of Polly to say, oh, Dr. banged his head then, Polly to say, Wotan thinks this should happen, so it's the level of what's already been programmed into them by Wotan and what they need to be told by particularly by Professor Brett or Professor Crimpton, is never quite certain. Oh, dear old Alan. He was a fine Ebenezer pantomime guy, but he was also a sort of English blazer-wearing English gent, cricket lover, utter gentleman, and very stoical. Taught himself to write again after his stroke, so that he could sign autographs largely for Doctor Who fans, though he did carry on as well. He didn't get much to do in this episode, but he was a nice fellow. Yeah. Gosh, they're all dead now. Because John Rolfe died last year too. Last year was Alan Curtis. This year, God, I'm a anorak-clad harbinger of doom. This is John Slavid, who's also in the massacre. But some of this scene is cut, isn't it? And this is where they have to piece bits of it together. That's beautiful quality, that film. So that bit of his... Oh, it's a Toby Ale, one of the few references to me in Doctor Who. So his final lines, I think, were originally... it was still him on camera. And this is Dwight Wiley, who's what's he credited as, radio announcer. He is also playing himself. Dwight Wiley was the first black radio announcer employed by the BBC. He went on to have an illustrious broadcasting career in Jamaica and Canada, but yes, made history, and also makes history here as the first credited black speaking performer in Doctor Who, I think. Although Julian Cherrier, who is Zephon in the Daleks' Master Plan, was of Indian descent. And I think Chris Cornelis, who's credited as a Saracen in The Crusade, but he doesn't actually have any lines. I love that shot of the war machine in the water with the bike. This film stuff is absolutely glorious. I love it. And there's a couple of prominent extras like Sam Mansouri, who's one of the delegates in Mission to the Unknown. But I think combination of speaking and a credit. It's Dwight Wiley, but you don't see him. So then you've got Elroy Josephs as Jamaica in the next story, The Smugglers. It's just interesting to note, that it's something that one comments upon in the 60s because it is such an infrequent occurrence or not an occurrence up until this point. But I just say that as a point of interest because you can't see Dwight Wiley, so some people might not know what he represented and who he was. But he also is a person who plays himself. Michael Ferguson's really interesting with his camera, isn't he? He'll start on people's feet, and he sort of. Oh, I think here's another cut. Yeah, so this quote, that close up of Wotan was originally a shot of Polly and Professor Brett, but because it's a threat of death, it has been cut and replaced with a shot of Wotan. I mean, it's a really interesting thing to buy a science fiction series, and they go, anytime anyone is threatened with death, we shall cut it. I mean, what do you expect to happen? God, I don't know how many murder mysteries were hacked to pieces, unlike any of the people in the murder mysteries who just disappeared off screen and nobody referred to their deaths. Hartnell's on brilliant form in this, and I'd quite like to see him teaming up with William Mervyn quite a lot. William Mervyn's one of those people who sort of always look the same age, but I think he was only in his 60s when he died. But I do like the combination of Sir Charles and Doctor Who. And it's interesting the sort of variation in quality we've got of some of this film. Some of it's quite grainy. That's a ropey shot. Is that Mike Reed? Mike Reed from EastEnders. He does get a close-up later. That is him on the left. Mike Reed from EastEnders played Frank Butcher, was a stand-up comedian and a very recognisable figure in the UK for decades, especially sort of in the 80s and 90s when he was in EastEnders as a regular. But he was known before that, but he wasn't known at this point, where he's an extra playing a soldier in The War Machines. And another comedian, Mike Yarwood, who was extremely famous as an impressionist. Not a very good one, but the only one. Again, that's a bit like, a lot of things in the sort of 60s and 70s, if you were the only one, and he was the only impressionist. But anyway, he was huge, and his shows were loved and watched by many. He was supposed to be an extra in this, but he had a dentist's appointment, and he never returned from it. So Mike Yarwood was never an uncredited extra in Doctor Who, but if he was going to be one, it would have been in this story. I love the way that Ben announces himself as companion material. John Boyd Brent as the sergeant. He's one of the, actually, you think you've seen somewhere, actually hasn't done all that much, and I think stopped acting in the late 60s, or his last credit goes up to the late 60s, but he didn't die till 2005, and you sort of think, I wonder what he got up to, and I wonder if sitting there he knew that there'd be somebody like me who, if I happened upon him while he was mowing his lawn, would have been so excited because he'd been in Doctor Who. And he was around, as I say, till 2005, so he's sort of contactable. Somebody who could have had stories to tell, but we never did. We just missed a bit of Mike Reed there. I love these shots through the railings. Michael Ferguson's a terrific director. He knows how to make it look splendid. And this is fairly straightforward stuff. It's Sol just trying to put a box in a wrestling ring. But Ben has totally announced himself as a companion. Love the fact there's a phone box there as well. The newer phone box, the red phone box. But the War Machines are very cumbersome, but doesn't matter. Ben has announced himself as the hero there. He's and he's very pretty, isn't he? Handsome boy. But Ben is deferent to the Doctor. He's you're brave with Polly, but he also has a sense of duty. But he's also game, and does does the brave thing because he thinks he should. I love Ben and Polly. I do wish they had more of a stint. Really, I don't know quite why Innes Lloyd fell out of love with him. I think Fraser Hines as Jamie is great, and it was unfortunate timing for them. But I do think as a result we didn't get as much as we could have done out of, I think, a very underrated team, Ben and Polly. And I do hope that they got married and lived happily ever after. And I'm sorry that Michael Craze died relatively young. and I thought could have had maybe a better career. Hartnell has a great face. He's got a brilliant hat, and is full of beans. I mean, is not in any way seem like a liability, you know, seeing as he's actually gone in 8 episodes time. Although he was obviously he was poorly, but also he's not that old. Like William Mervyn, I mean, there are people their age now who are sex symbols. You know what I mean? Whereas these look like a couple of great grandfathers. But I'm loving the amount of film on this. I'd forgotten how much beautiful film there is. Carl Conway. He's used by Michael Ferguson in Ambassador's Death. I like the verisimilitude. Verisimilitude alert. I use that word too often. Of all the sort of, you know, people on telephones in the background and there's lots of sort of stuff going on. But Carl Conway is in the Ambassadors of Death, but he's also in one of the first nudie films, when they had to do nudist camp films, you know, so it's not porn or anything. It was films, you know, set in a naturist place, so therefore you could see, I think, bums and boobs. It's the film that's shown at the beginning of Carry On Camping. They're all watching in the cinema. One of the stars of that is Carl Conway, and another one is Katie Cashfield, who's one of the Thals in the very first Dalek story. They're sort of extras, but they all get a credit in episode 7. So yes, Carl Conway did one of the first nudie films. He was also a pirate radio DJ. I love all the special sounds. Very good. Again, because no incidental music. This set's rather nice as well, actually. It doesn't quite convince you it's outside, but I think that's a slight lighting problem. But it's attractive looking, and it's an interesting backdrop because it's receding into the background with, I think, a cheaty perspective behind the metalwork there. Oh, before noon, that's a bit Police Squad, isn't it? A bit of back projection there for the zooming war machine, but no, that's okay. It's quite fun. We're back to the room where the two baddies yell the plot at each other. It's a bit of a waste of John Cater. I wish he'd done another Doctor Who because he's so good. Whereas John Harvey comes back. John Harvey as Professor Brett, who I think is very bad in this because he does bad science fiction acting. But he's really good in the Macra Terror, which Sandra Bryant is also in. I haven't got a clue what Votan is saying, unfortunately. I wonder why they went for a echoey whisper. That's belting along, isn't it? I know it's slightly speeded up, but that's all right. That looks good. No, that's fine. There's not really a Hartnell story like this. But I mean, yeah, look at, and I like the use of the post office tower as a sort of geographical motif to really centre it in the now. I always get a little thrill when I can see it. It looks giant, doesn't it, over London now? I mean, it wouldn't. It would have some serious competition scattered around it. So yeah, and Ben, continuing his quest to be a companion, goes to save Polly. Good for him. Why do they pronounce it Votan? Because it is with a W. And I did ask Mike for a second. I couldn't remember. But I remember when I first watched this, and because I'd always thought it was called Wotan. It did seem a slightly odd choice to say Votan, especially when it's an acronym. It's not called the Vil operated thought and analog or whatever it is. It's called the Will it's he does go quite a complicated route, Professor Crimpton, here to do that. And seeing as he was the one that resisted, I think it's slightly unfair that of the ones to die, it happens to be the person who worked the hardest not to submit. Now, doesn't he climb out of the way? Yes, you could just see John Cater getting the hell out of there because he didn't want to get squashed and blown up. But yeah, I think it's really slightly unfair that of all the, if any of the characters were to sort of have a thematically appropriate death, it would perhaps be Professor Brett rather than poor old Professor Crimpton, who's just hurried back into place again. And oh yes, so well, that's a bit of a shame. So it's a fairly straightforward denouement, isn't it? The Doctor sends the machine to shoot Wotan. I mean, it's fairly plot-wise, it's pretty straightforward, but I don't think it matters because basically the pull of this episode is, war machines in London, or war machine in London, and the sort of worldwide thing going on there, which I think is all very cleverly portrayed. And here we get poor old Dodo's off-camera exit, which I think's a bit of a blow. Anyone been to that corner of London? I should go there, really. I'm sure it's been identified where it is. My geography's terrible. I'd have to look that up. Oh, and look at them. Don't they look great? I love Polly's costume there. Don't they look absolutely terrific? She looks brilliant in that hat and the sort of Bretonny shirt thing. I think they look just so modern and game and exciting and beautiful. The pair of them. I'd love to have I'd love to have more space adventures with them. And she's been sacked in a really callous manner, and you're never going to see her again. HMS Teaser. I've never noticed that before. So Ben's ship is the HMS Teaser. And I like the out of order little joke as well. So yeah, so Ben hadn't knocked the thing off the end of the gun. He's got the Doctor's ring. Isn't that why they go back to the TARDIS? Something strange about that police box. That was in one of the documentaries. Key, the ring, is it? Oh yeah, it's not the Doctor's ring. It's the Doctor's key that falls out of his cloak when he didn't knock the end off the gun. So that's why it's a plot point. Ben's got the spare key. Go on, Ben. It's your time travel. You're going to land back on the same day, on the most invaded day of the Earth. Because whilst this is going on, the chameleons are also trying, and the Daleks are there to kidnap the Doctor. So what a day! And love that. And then you have this funny look from two people. One of whom is Doreen Ubels, who was one of the tribe in the very first Doctor Who story. So she's in the first complete Hartnell, and she's in the last complete Hartnell. And it's revealed that the voice of Wotan is Gerald Taylor, so we don't get the and Wotan credit. But by God, I'm happy it was there for the first three. And well done, Gerald Taylor, because he's often inside a monster. Oh, Eric Meval, he was the music editor on The Prisoner. I think he's still around, actually. Because he was very young when he did The Prisoner, which surprised me. Yes, I'd forgotten he'd done Doctor Who. But yes, Gerald Taylor, Dalek operator, but he's also Damon's assistant in The Underwater Menace, Baker's man in The Demons, and his best part, Vega Nexos in The Monster of Peladon, in which I think he's very, very good. But he got to do whispering Bob Wotan as well. So, well, that was a joyous. I still think it's a fairly thin plot, and I do think there is a little too much of John Harvey going, and now we are going to do this, and Curtis going, do this thing, but but I like the modernness of it. I like the idea of the network of computers, Doctor Who in modern London, Ben and Polly, all of that. I do think the rest of season 3, or a lot of the rest of season 3, is more interesting. So I am sad that this does better in polls, which I guess due to it existing, but also I think it's probably more the sort of story most people want Doctor Who to be, and I'm aware I'm probably being slightly pretentious going, but I like the more cerebral, slightly duller and odder stuff of the Wiles and Tosh era. But I'm drawn to that. But I'm also drawn to a lot of it because it's missing and we can't see it, and I've always got a thing about conferring status on things you cannot have, because that's somehow more tantalizing and more tragic. So it's all based on feeling sorry for ourselves. So I've got to choose the thing about episode 4 that I like, and I've got to choose a thing overall. And I think because Pip mentioned that Votan gets a credit, though he didn't choose it in episode 1, he's not going to choose that. So I'm going to do a bit of gamesmanship here, because I do love the fact, and I love an and credit. Did I say in episode, my friend John Bruford and I always called the actor Paul Winfield and Paul Winfield, because in most things that he was in, he got an and credit. And an and credit is a very special thing, because it means you're not the star, but you're slightly different from the rest of the supporting or main supporting cast, because they sort of separate you out, and that sometimes, for a famous actor doing a cameo, or just somebody who's got an important part, and I think it's all to do with money as well. They say, well, we'll pay you less, but we'll give you an and credit, so it's a bit more prominent, and blah blah blah. If you're a credits junkie, which I am, the and credit is a marvelous thing. And I love the fact that in the whole of classic Doctor Who, the only and credit is for a fictional computer. But Pip won't choose that. I think I'm going to choose the whole 20th century London, the verisimilitude of the actual, newsreaders and the sort of modern day army. I think I can have all of those things sort of wrapped up in a kind of contemporary action drama today thing that very much comes to the fore in episode 4. And my thing for the whole story is Ben and Polly. I love Ben and Polly. I think they look fabulous. I think they're great characters. I think they're both introduced in a really good way. They both get plenty to do. Polly even gets taken over, but she's established herself before that. Ben immediately announces himself as terrific companion material. I think they contrast so wonderfully with Hartnell. And I think there could have been a really special relationship there, with him being all sort of, old and he's not that grumpy with them, but the elder statesman with these two sort of very loyal. I quite like the fact that they're deferent, and they don't sort of go, "Oh, granddad, you're a bit rubbish," but they're actually, yes, we respect your years, but we also provide a youthful contrast to them. So those are my things. What are Pip Madeley's things that he likes about episode 4 and the War Machines as a whole?
Great thing number 4, and I'm afraid this is a bit of a silly one again, but hey, it's my choice. It's the bit where William Hartnell nearly smacks his head on the top of the War Machine in episode 4. It's just the sort of instinctive reaction. He swerves away from it. It's just so human and real. And I love the fact that they couldn't cut those things out in the 60s because, of time and money, tapes and all that. TV needs more of that, just a sort of really human touch. And, it's a good thing he didn't smack his head, of course, but it's funny to watch.
Yeah, fair enough. And this is his whole thing.
Okay, so last one, and if you've got this, Toby, I'll be amazed. My bonus choice from the War Machines, it's the absolutely ridiculous moustache that's being sported by the army officer standing in the background at Covent Garden in episode 3. He's got a stick as well. His moustache is so huge, it should have a credit of its own. And it even looks like a W. So I'm wondering whether Wotan actually gave it him. Maybe he was under the control of Wotan, because we know how much Wotan loves brand management. Anyway, yeah, that's the sort of nonsense that I love Doctor Who for, really. So there you go.
Well, I did notice the moustache, Pip, but I think I noticed it last episode, didn't I? Yeah. But I didn't choose it as one of my favourite things, but I do like the idea. Yeah, that's a hint that he's a Wotan spy, because he normally has his moustache like this. Normally his moustache is facing southerly, but since this morning when he started talking in a monotone, it's pointing to the sky. And that's what they should show at the end. If it was a real sort of X-Files-y modern thing, they'd show him in Whitehall and his moustache would be twitching, and you'd hear in his head saying, "Doctor Who is required," and his moustache would twitch, and they're still there in Whitehall. So I like to think that yes, well, one of Wotan's military slave is still waiting for phase 2 of the War Machine building. Well, there we go. A story that I like all the black and white stuff, but I had a slight beef against. Not because I didn't like it, but because I think everyone else likes it too much. And what an ungenerous way to think that is. And that's what I'm trying to inoculate myself against in this process. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. And if more people like this than the myth makers, it doesn't matter. It's not going to make any material difference to anybody, even if, in my view, they're wrong, because I think the Mythmakers is just glorious. It doesn't matter, and I enjoy it, and I thought it was fun, and I think it's fine, and I could easily enjoy that without worrying about what's gone on before it, what's come after it, and how other people receive it. Listen to oneself. Bit of perspective is required. No, I enjoyed that, and I really like the sort of modern vibe that it has. And I say it would be nice to see more of Hartnell doing that, but actually the fact that he only really does it that time is sort of what makes it so special. I know there's the bit on the Empire State Building in the chase, which is probably today, and there's Planet of Giants, but everybody's small. But that's really the yes. So they qualify, but I think this one is this is self-consciously modern in a way that I think other Doctor Who prior to that sought to be, a contrast, otherworldly or backwards in time. Whereas actually in this one, the contrast with the modern day is the Doctor himself, and he looks absolutely great. I wonder if he had some psychic paper, and that's what we didn't see. That's got to be what we didn't see, because he just walks into the post office tower. And I quite like the chutzpah of that, of just going, well, let's not bother with him having to sort of talk his way into it. It's just Doctor Who. So look, and is he Doctor Who? Again, that's up to you. I think he's Doctor Who on the credits, but he's not called Doctor Who. That makes no logical sense, but it's what makes sense to me. And that is all that matters.
I think you'll find.
Well, I couldn't not investigate that moustache, could I? It belongs to the brilliantly monikered Biff Byfield, who is playing his only role in Doctor Who. He was actually a saxophonist. He played in a jazz band or several. So if you can imagine that excellent moustache stripped of its military accoutrements and instead in the smoky dinginess of a jazz club, it perhaps takes on a different hue. The other excellent moustache belonging to the other military official, they're actually credited as top brass in the paperwork, not on IMDb, which calls them senior military officer or something, but they're actually top brass in the War Machine's paperwork, is Louis Alexander, who was quite a handy extra because of his excellent, neatly trimmed moustache, and he quite often played authority figures, although, like Biff, this is his only Doctor Who, although Louis was married to Aileen Lewis, who, like him, was a prolific background artiste, and she appeared in an episode of Doctor Who and the Silurians. So they are a married couple who both did a Doctor Who. Lewis brilliantly lived till 2010 and to be 100 years old, whereas Aileen, when she died, was 99. See, I think there are brilliant stories even to be had lurking around in stock hired military uniforms in the back of one single episode of a shot of Doctor Who. I salute you, Biff and Lewis and Aileen, and Biff and Lewis, I salute your moustaches as well. I love you all. Thank you for listening and for watching, if you're doing that, which currently much later because I'm editing the videos much further down the line because it takes ages. But anyway, thanks for listening. And as I record this, it's before the Sunday of the European Cup final that England got in as I record this yesterday. And the last time England were in an international final was 1966, when the War Machines was on. So there we go. My release schedule means that will now all be history anyway, but as I speak, it seems quite appropriate, and I hadn't realised that when I started on this particular adventure. I just watched it because I fancied watching it. So maybe something was being transferred. I mean, I did get a phone call, and there was this funny noise, and I understand. Thank you very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My special guest watching the War Machines was Pip Madeley, who can be found on Twitter at Pip Madeley, and he's definitely one of the Doctor Who highlights on that pernicious den of vipers. He's very funny and his videos are great. I would like to thank him, and I would also like to thank the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include some names from the early days of when I first went onto Patreon, like Jim Sangster, Gav Rymil, David Gillespie, Andrew East, David Matthewman, Siobhan Galichon, John Rivers, Gregory Hudson, Quarridors, Anthony Carroll, Mark Aldridge, Sebastian April, Matthew Houliston, Stephen White, Rob Dawson, Darren Howard, Stephen Moffat, and Mark Trevor Owen. The music for this podcast is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Well, there we go. Yes, as mentioned at the beginning, it's a bit sobering talking about Michael Ferguson in the present tense there, and indeed on the next one. I did The Seeds of Death immediately afterwards. And what a nice man he was. I did a long Who's Round interview with him, which is available on the Big Finish site. If you would like to join those patrons, and those ones I mentioned were some early followers of the cause, I'm very, very grateful to them, and to all of them, and to anybody that goes to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where you can get advance releases, bonus material. There's the Happy Times and Places are 5 or 6 months in advance of where you hear them on iTunes or elsewhere. There are also interviews with cast members that aren't available anywhere else, as well as exclusives and pictures of my dog, which I put there as a bit of frippery, but turned out to be more popular than anything I've actually done. So that's patreon.com/Toby Haydock. If you can't do the monthly thing, that's absolutely fine, totally understandable. Ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock is where you can do a one-off donation whenever it takes your fancy. I'm also a stand-up comedian. Come and see me at Excess Malarkey Comedy Club every Tuesday in Manchester at 8 p.m. and it's online on the first Sunday of every month at 8 p.m. on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey, which is free. We do encourage donations, but it's free at the point of entry, and it's me introducing 3 or 4 acts from the national comedy circuit. And there's an archive up there on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey, even when it's not on. So check that out whenever you like. And it's on Twitter at Excess Malarkey. That's an X, an S, and the word Malarkey. I am on Twitter at Toby Haydock, and these podcasts have their own feed at Haydock Podcasts. So avail yourself of all of that if the 2 hours, 13 minutes you've been listening to me blathering on isn't quite enough for one lifetime. Doctor Who is required. Bring him here. Shall we just pretend he didn't say that, folks? Yeah, absolutely. Great. Yeah, that never happened. Well, except for next week when I get all the human guys to say Doctor Who a lot as well. Yeah, that didn't happen either. Didn't it? But it's there. Didn't happen. Nothing to see here. You sure? Go away.